Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, a leading business podcast talking about business in the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American from Pittsburgh, known as the King of Networking, connecting people from my unique communication lab in Brazil. Today's guest is Alison McGowan, and she's joining us from London, England. I first interviewed Alison several years ago. Alison McGowan was founder and CEO of Hidden Pousadas Brazil, the leading online guide to uniquely beautiful pousada accommodations in Brazil, bed and breakfast, inns, ecolodges, country mansions, and small boutique hotels. She's a Brazil travel expert influencer and a specialist at the time on online social strategies for encouraging growth of tourism. Since 2017, Alison is founder of Florence Latin Jazz in Islington in London. The Florence Latin Jazz House showcases some of the best musicians passing through London. It's a nonprofit and exclusive pop-up house that has concerts with top South American musicians. So Alison, you never stop. So tell us about your transition from Pousadas in Brazil to pop-up concerts in London.
Hi, Tom. How are you? And greetings from London, where it is extremely hot today. In answer to your question, transitioning from Hidden Pousadas Brazil to Florence Latin Jazz is partially because I decided that it was time to move back from Brazil to London. And one of the things, if you're running a website on Pousadas, is that the information you have to give has to be up to date.
Right.
And obviously, if I was no longer in Brazil, it was going to be difficult to actually deliver what I'd planned to do in the past. I'm still in great contact with all the Pousada owners, and I'm following their stories themselves. But it was time for me to move back, and I had the luxury of owning a house in London. So it was not a difficult thing coming back. People ask me if I don't ever get saudades for Brazil. And I say, I don't think you miss things that you can have. And I could always go back to Brazil at any time. However, the one thing that I miss on a daily basis, apart from walking along the beach in the morning, is I always miss the music.
Right.
The Brazilian music, there's not that much of it in London. And I thought, well, I could just combine all sorts of things, like seeing my friends, seeing friends of friends, listening to Brazilian music, with the fact that I know an awful lot of Brazilian musicians, of the top musicians. And before the pandemic and after, now they're touring again, a lot of them were passing through London. So I decided that whenever they were coming through London, and I knew they were coming through London, I would invite them to play house parties in my house.
Okay.
So that's how it began. And it began with David Chu, who's actually a cellist, but plays jazz as well, with Blas Rivera, who's an Argentinian. Both of them live in Rio. And they came over and said that they would like to start it off with me. So they did a concert, and I invited 20 or 30 friends, and everybody turned up, and it just went from there.
So that really is a pop-up concert.
Oh, they're definitely pop-up concerts. If at most I know about the next two concerts that are going to be, but otherwise it's people say, I'm coming in a couple of weeks, do you have room for another concert? And I'll look at my diary, and if I can fit them in, I'll fit them in. Yeah, it would have to be on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday, but other than that, there's no restrictions.
Oh, well, and that's how things start. It's
Indeed,
I think, and you know me as the king of networking. Networking is important for many things, and what you have shown before, and again, music is fundamental for networking. It's one of the places. Many musicians don't network well. They network amongst themselves and amongst few, but to help them show themselves and become known, that's a requirement today.
Indeed, yes. I mean, it's very strange that when I was in Brazil, I had a lot of friends from the music business, musicians themselves, and a lot of foreign friends, all of whom spoke Portuguese extremely well. So this was not a problem of language.
Mm-hmm.
But if I gave parties, the musicians would sit in one room and all of my other friends would sit in another room. They wouldn't talk to each other.
Right.
And I think one of the things that happens here in London, particularly in Florence Works, which this is where the pop-up concerts are, which is my home. And here everybody mixes. It's partly because everything's on one floor, so you've got the piano at one end of the.
So you can't hide, right?
No, you can't hide. And the kitchen where the wine is at the other end. So there is no way that you can get from the music to the wine without talking to people, because it's not that big a house. So if there's 35 people here, and I have to say it's one of the things that gives me the most pleasure. It's not after the music, it is the fact that I see people meeting other people, making friends with other people, and then going off into the sunset and keeping those contacts going. So there's now a really big lot of people who have met at this place and just love it because they share a love of Latin American music.
Great story, Alison. But well, we talked about hidden pousadas, and most pousadas are hidden because nobody knew anything about them. And now we're talking about hidden musicians who have a
We're also talking about
concert.
You're also talking about a hidden venue, because you would never find this place.
Right.
It's down a beco, it's down an alleyway at the end, and there's no way out. Once you get down here, it's me or me. But no, people can't find it. Also, because our local council decided to change the address 20 years ago, but it still has an old address on it. So people don't know whether this is the right place to come to. So they really have to know me.
They have to know you to know you, right? To get there. So, but that's fantastic. But that point, and back to the music, one of the things that attracted me to Brazil years ago was music. I'm not a musician, and most people aren't, but we do appreciate music, and Brazilians do have a knack in music. They're spontaneous. They pick it up, and that here in the corner bars or whatever, they don't really need even an instrument to get a group together and to sing.
That was the passion,
I would say, well, a box of matches and a bottle and a spoon, and they're in business. They're singing, they're clanking away, and that always really attracted me. I says, wow. Everything else in the whole world seems so structured, so organized, and here it's spontaneous and it's constant.
I think it's the spontaneity, which is the wonderful thing. I mean, the last person that we had playing here was a guy called Kiko Continentuno, who plays with Azimuth and plays with Milton Nascimento. He's the keyboard player for them. He's absolutely top class, but you don't know whether Kiko's actually going to make it to your place or not. So in the end, I ended up I sent a taxi to pick him up, but he wouldn't come unless I actually went with the taxi to pick him up and bring him back here. Because if they're on tour, I think it's a dependency thing. If you're on tour, then you have your program in front of you, and you do this at this time, this at that time, this, and they were doing 7 countries in 8 days.
Wow!
So he didn't know whether he was still in LA, which is where they'd come from. I mean, he was just completely out of it. But picking him up, he came here, he saw the piano, he opened the piano, and he just started playing. And the whole place, I mean, people are always silent when people are playing here anyway. But just everyone just sat and listened. And at the end of it, everyone got up. The applause was absolutely incredible. It was an amazing thing. But that's what I call spontaneity. Was just, he didn't plan what he was going to play. He just sat down and played.
Yeah, and to that point, whoever goes and is there with you at one of these pop-up concerts, it's unique. It's
totally.
That is. You say, well, we'll come back tomorrow. There'll be the same thing. It won't be. It may be the same people, but it will never be the same.
Well, it will always be good music.
Without a doubt. But,
and if there is any question about whether the music will be superb or not, I cancel it. I mean, I've only done that twice, but I will pull the plug if I think that there's a change of people in the band or there's something happening I don't like. I will pull the plug rather than put on bad music here.
Right. Well, you're still the boss, right? It's a pop-up concert, but you run the show.
That is the privilege. That's the privilege of running it, Tom, is that I am still the boss. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. But and two, well, even jazz is spontaneous, right? No matter where it is in the world, I think. But the Latin flavor that we talked about before the show makes Latin jazz different, and to
it's
us
one of the things. One
attractive.
thing that I have a belief that good things always come out of bad. I mean, if you're not dead, then good things are going to come out of bad. And one of the bad things during the dictatorship in the 1960s in Brazil was that a lot of people had to leave the country.
Right.
And included in that was not just musicians who were singers, who were, it wasn't just the lyrics that was the problem. It seemed to be the whole artistic community.
Right.
So I was living in Paris in 1975. And I really didn't like Paris. It wasn't my place at all for all sorts of reasons. But the 8th month I was there, a friend of mine brought some guy she picked up in a bar to come and see me when we were going out for a few drinks. And he said he was a musician, and we got talking, and then it turned out that he lived with a whole load of other musicians, and that he was Brazilian, and that he wanted to get home but couldn't get home, so they thought they'd play some more. And these were, really amazing musicians. I mean, people I would never have met normally. And we just used to hang out in the bars every night. And I fell in love with Brazilian music. My two girlfriends fell in love with the musicians. I still maintain that I got the better deal out of it because I get to see the music. But anyway, but that's how it started, and that was back in 1975. And when I went to Brazil firstly in 1979, and I landed in Rio, it happened to be the year of the amnesty. So all the musicians started coming back to Brazil.
Right.
And all of the ones from Paris, who had then gone to Denmark and New York, they all came back with my address. So one by one, I had a stream of musicians coming through my house, all of whom I used to take to jam in the local bars. So that's how it started. So and nobody knew I had a proper job at the time. So, they just used to introduce me as, this is Alison, she's a musician. And that was it. So the
story goes on and on and on. And
yes, I'm sorry about that.
No. But that's exciting because I came to Brazil in 1970.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you mentioned that time in Brazil, so I was here. You were in Paris, but I was here when actually not only music, communication in general was censored. 1970s, 60s, 70s, Brazil was a military dictatorship. So you could go out, and this struck me when I first came, because, university, going to the bar and trying to talk to people wouldn't talk.
And nobody would talk.
They wouldn't talk. And I said, why don't these people, well, obviously I couldn't speak Portuguese, but they wouldn't talk. They would talk about soccer, but that was it. I said, well, these people don't talk about anything. And this was, the Vietnam War, there's a bunch of stuff happening, but people would not talk. And even in the music, they'd listen. I couldn't understand the words, so that was part of it. So I really went back to your point. Well, because of the lyrics, many musicians were adjusting their lyrics in a sense of protest. All right. Well, I couldn't understand that because I didn't understand that, and that's why many of them had to leave and left. And so that was really a gap. And the music in Brazil was sort of lyric-free. It was music, but not a whole lot of words with it. So when you mentioned 79 and everybody coming back, that's really when they started putting lyrics together, or started saying or singing the lyrics that they had but could not be sung in Brazil. So that's something true. From me coming from the States, or you coming from England, when you feel you don't understand that. Today, the world's repressed and everybody's doing everything. But at that time, it was a shock. I says, wow, these people can't even sing a song.
But going back to the good things coming out of bad, what happened when these musicians, these were all instrumental musicians, when they went to Paris and Denmark and New York and other parts of the US, what they did was they took the bossa nova, samba, and all of those beats with them, but they mixed it with jazz that they picked up there.
Right.
So that, I think, is how Brazilian samba jazz was formed, was actually this mixture of outside influences mixing with the bossa nova and samba and all of that. And it's made it a much richer and I think it's I love Brazilian jazz, so I mean it's for me.
Well, that works for everything. You're a much richer person because of everywhere you've been and things you've seen and heard,
definite.
and we are.
Yeah.
So I think that when we talk about a global world and going someplace else, that is richening. But at the point of networking, when I said it, and you see that, I say musicians don't like to talk. They talk amongst themselves.
They talk through the music.
That may go back to that history that, in the 60s and 70s, they couldn't talk. So they wouldn't talk to strangers.
Yes, it may do that. I hadn't thought of that because I haven't married the two things together. But people don't understand when I say that the period that I spent in Brazil, first off, 79 to 84, I can count the number of serious conversations I had on the fingers of two hands.
Right.
I mean, and I didn't understand why it was that nobody would say anything apart from, well, what are we doing today? It wasn't even what are we doing tomorrow. It's what are we doing today? What are we doing right now? And I'd give dinner parties that people say, yeah, I'll come. And they'd arrive 2 hours late or 5 hours late or the next day, or they'd forget about it completely. And that took me a long time to get used to.
But I personally feel that's part of it. And I think having been part of that, we can appreciate that. Other people don't. And many people, I think even Brazilians during that time, don't really understand what was happening. It's not that they refused to talk, they just became more cautious.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely different when I went back in 2002. So that it was.
Well, now you've taken all that happiness and richness to London.
And the happiness
now
continues.
Pop-up concerts, so everybody's happy. Yeah. You're happy, right?
I'm extremely happy, and we also have quite a lot of wine here and quite a lot of homemade food, and so it becomes a party every time. The music starts it off, and then people just stay and mingle, and quite often it's the musicians that are the last to go home.
Well, I think that's the essence of music. That's why many people say we go out to a bar. You're going out to hear music. You're going out to enjoy yourself. And in Brazil, as you've seen that in other places, it's really the music's the attraction point. Obviously, it could be the drink, could be the wine, could be the beer, could be with anything, and it's part of the conversation with people. But people go really to hear, and that's popular here in Brazil. You could go anywhere, as it was in probably in Paris that you saw. You could go anywhere, and somebody would be playing something.
Yeah, although actually in 1975 it wasn't like that. It's much more like that now. But in 1975 it was. But what has become like that again is Brazil now, post-pandemic. Now you're seeing them coming back and playing on street corners again, which had not been the case even before the pandemic started. It had gone really quiet and not very good at all. And suddenly you're seeing everyone back and playing. And I think when I was in Brazil just now, they did 2 concerts for me. Kiko arranged 2 concerts with the top musicians. And once it was only just post-pandemic, so there were still people wearing masks and things.
Right.
Well, half of them were, half of them weren't. But once they got on stage, they wouldn't get off. It was supposed to be a jam session, and they were supposed to be limited to two pieces of music on stage. And once they got on, that was it. There was a big fight outside of the musicians who couldn't get on stage because the ones that were on there just, no, I'm here now. I'm playing again.
My turn.
Yeah, because the thing about musicians is also they have to play, and they hadn't played for so long. Right. It was just the joy of playing.
Right. Yeah. Well, you say they need to play. It could be personal satisfaction, but that's their life. That energizes themselves. So
yeah.
And I saw that you sent me, and I'll share that YouTube of the concert that they had here, which is exciting to see that happening.
Yes, it is.
And back to the spontaneity, you see the jazz brings that. It just opens things up. It's like opening up a box, right? Or opening up a new bottle of wine, whatever, and just checking out the flavor, smelling what have you, and then you're happy. So
yeah.
I want to congratulate you again for what you're doing. It's amazing. All right, it has been a long time since we've spoken.
Well,
but good to see you
are welcome
again.
Anytime you come to London, Tom. I'll make sure that there's a concert going on.
Wait, send me an address and I'll try to find it. Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to see that because Alison, you're a special person. When you were here with Hidden Pousadas, you were special in what you were doing. You're even more special today in what you are doing today. And what you do, you preserve culture, wherever it is. And I think that's important. And music is global, right? Music satisfies people, no matter what, if it's Brazilian, Latin, anything. And I understand it's a challenge to be able to promote that, to do what you're doing. It's not easy. It seems easy.
It seems very easy to other people.
Everything seems easy when it's a success. But, the backstage, that it isn't. It is work. It's enjoyable, but it's work. And you dedicate energy to doing that. And a person once said, do what you love. And you can see that you love what you do, and it shows, okay?
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate
well, where can our audience find you, if not necessarily in the alley in London? Where can they find you?
Well, I specialize in hidden, Tom. So, you're not going to find me. No, I'm on Facebook as Alison McGowan. So that's a possibility. Or you can find me on LinkedIn under the same. And the Florence Latin Jazz is part of that.
Very good. Well, thanks again for being part today.
Thanks to you, Tom.
Okay, and for our audience, then, it is Alison McGowan, and that is A-L, let me get that right again. She was the pop nerd, so it is Alison, A-L-I-S-O-N, the last name M-C-G-O-W-A-N. Alison McGowan on LinkedIn and Facebook as Alison McGowan. Okay, and it is the Florence Latin Jazz House in London. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, thank you. Our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence, is a market research specialist in the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, focusmi.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.